Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between. Mory Fontanez is a crisis executive, a former crisis executive, who spent 2 decades guiding Fortune 500 CEOs, global brands, and public figures through high-stake moments. However, when she had a crisis of her own, a deep personal crisis, she had a choice. Did she listen to her intuition, or did she turn away and keep doing what she's doing? Of course, she's here today because she listened to her intuition, and she's teaching us to do the same, how to tune in to our own inner voices, what intuition is, what it sounds like, and how we can listen to that guiding voice so we don't have the same crises that she helps CEOs deal with on a daily basis. And the secret to all of this is, and the thing that's so magic about it is it's very, very simple. And many CEOs are using this method and her work every single day to tune into their own intuition. So here we are. We're always talking about intuition like it's this woo-woo thing that lots of people are not doing or that people are not really talking about doing. And the reality is CEOs are hiring her to help them do this more. So with that, I bring you today's episode with Mory Fontanez.
We need at our table of awareness the logician, but equally we need the intuitive, we need the mystic.
I almost died. I was allowed to go to the very precipice of death, of life and death, and look over the edge. And I was allowed to behold what was there and allowed to come back. Most people aren't.
When we talk about being aligned with ourself or being aligned with our soul or hearing our higher self, that's really what we're talking about, is being connected to that divine part of ourself, that light-filled part of us that is connected to God energy, that is connected to everybody here and every experience we've ever had.
If more doctors, more professionals can open up to use intuitive gifts in their work, that's really important.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, mediumship, near-death experiences, consciousness, and what it all means. Welcome, Mory, to Life, Death, and the Space Between.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, really delighted to be here with you.
Okay, so you were in Fortune 500 companies. You were high energy, high stress, high everything. How did this shift happen for you? I always like to understand people's kinds of their opening, their spiritual opening, their spiritual awakening.
Yeah, great question. I was on the agency side for about 20 years. So that means I worked at a first marketing and then PR agency, global PR agency. And, I was drawn to that because what I was always really good at from childhood was 2 things, like storytelling and problem solving. And so I always tell people your purpose is, one big part of that equation is just what naturally you're good at, what comes to you very naturally. And so what I found myself drawn to more and more in PR was crisis management. And, being the one with my team to run into the fire that other people had created as they were running out, and really starting to, one, help settle things down, but also help leaders identify what is it that we can say and do to regain trust in this moment when there has been harm, either perceived harm or real harm that was done. And I did that for so long, I sort of had gone on autopilot until I started to notice in myself this sort of like disassociation happening. Like I was just kind of waking up, going to work, coming home, and in this rote situation. And at the time I was a single mom with 2 very little kids, 2 and 3.5. And I had this story in my mind that, you've made it. I'm a child of immigrants. You have the American dream. I was the head of global strategy at the largest independent PR firm in the world. This is it. You better, whatever's going on with you, you need to ignore it. Well, that doesn't always work, obviously. That's the beginning of a breakdown. And so, the more that I started to feel detached from myself, and I would get that feedback from people around me who really knew me and loved me, the more I had to start to ask myself, is this worth it? Is this loss of yourself? Is this detachment from self, especially with two little babies who really rely on you, worth it? And the answer came very clearly from this place inside that was just, no, this isn't the way that I want to live my life. And I started to then get curious, like, what is it? What is my purpose then, if it's not this? And how do I live my life in a way that is both able to provide for my children and do this purpose? And so I started to just pay attention to myself at work. And I always tell them that's the first step. I'm not asking you to quit your job and run away, but pay attention to yourself, because in the span of that 8 to 7, which was usually the hours, you are being fulfilled in some ways and being drained in other ways. It's not all one paint brush with one paint color, right? I started paying attention to what is driving me here. What do I get excited about? What am I naturally really good at? And what is draining about this? And what I realized is when I get called into a situation with clients, there was a knowing in me that just allowed me to help them see clearly where they couldn't see clearly. And I started to get curious, like, what is this knowing in me? How do I know the answer? And if I know the answer, why don't they? And I started to just ask questions. When this thing happened, did you as a team have a feeling? Yeah, we had a gut feeling. Okay, well, why didn't you speak up? Well, what would we say? That's a weird thing to say out loud. And I started to realize, oh, we're talking about intuition. It's my intuition that they're paying for. It's theirs that they're shutting down. Why is this happening? And I began to realize that, like it was happening with myself, with feeling stuck in this job, when it comes to your own situation, your own life, fear is louder than intuition. And so when other people find themselves in crisis, all that means is that fear was louder than intuition in that moment. And that's why they have to delegate it to someone else who can clearly hear the answer when they can't.
So can I stop you for 1 second here? Because I want to ask something. So earlier on, you said you quieted yourself. You heard this voice that said basically, like, you can't continue down this path. Like, the answer to your question is no, this is not where you need to keep heading. How do you, in that moment, when you're hearing this, but I'm assuming there was a part of you that was afraid, right? Like, shit. Yeah. I know this isn't right for me. I know I can't keep down this path because I know where it will end, which is probably on some sort of antidepressant medication or, your body breaking down or whatever, however it proceeds to show up for you. How in those small moments when you know intuitively what you're supposed to do, but the fear creeps in and overrides it, how do you stay the path of the intuition and knowing I need to keep moving forward in this direction?
Yeah. The first critical tool here is discernment. For me, it was just being able to tell the difference between the intuitive thought and feeling and the fear-based thought and feeling. And then for me, and this is now what I teach clients and, talk about a lot, is then it's about looking for evidence. So every time I've felt this intuitive feeling, what have I done with it? And this is what I mean about starting to get curious at work. Like, oh, why does this work so well for me with clients? And how often am I right? I'm usually right most of the time. So this information system that feels very different than fear, and it feels different in different ways for different people. So I'm not here to tell you it should feel X or Y, but for me, my intuition is very grounded and clear and simple and factual, whereas fear has a lot of stories attached to it. And generally, I find this is true for most of the people I work with. So in that discernment and knowing the difference and then looking for the evidence, I was accountable to a choice. Do you want to keep picking the voice that's making you feel disassociated from yourself as a form of protection? Or are you curious enough and desirous enough of a new life, of a new connection, of being present in your life, that you are going to leap towards this other voice that feels so calm and clear? And I chose that feeling of being alive, of being connected. And I leapt towards it. And that is the hardest part, I think, when people ask me this question, is I wish I could say, you know intuitively, and then you know intellectually, and you know rationally, and your fear voice is quiet, and you go. But that's not true. We're very complicated people, right? And our psyche
Yes.
and our ego is involved. So what I'd rather is that you can discern. You can discern between the intuitive self and the fear self, and then look for evidence. What has fear gotten me? What has those moments where I just knew and I listened? What has that gotten me? And who do I choose today?
So how did this unfold for you? Because I mean, you're a single mom, you're the sole breadwinner, you're supporting your family.
Yeah.
And you've got a great job. I mean, when you talk about ego, right? You've got a great job with a great title, and people, I'm sure, with that comes a lot of good feelings, right? People praise that. We, as a society, there is hierarchy. There is a hierarchy in terms of how we view people based on the jobs that they hold, the degrees that they have, all of those things. So what does you stepping away from that look like?
It looks like this really interesting dance between courage and clarity and fear and self-doubt. It looked like 5 steps forward, I'm going to go register an LLC today. And 10 steps back, I'm not going to even look at that registration for 10 weeks because that scared the crap out of me. Then something happens again at work where I'm like, oh, I don't feel seen here or valued. And now I'm losing myself again. Oh, don't like that feeling. Oh, I'm going to go towards that little tingly feeling that happened when I registered 822 Group, which is the name of the consulting firm. Okay, now maybe I'll build a website. It was just this little tiny acts of faith.
Mm-hmm.
As I took more steps in those tiny acts of faith direction, opportunity presents itself when you are open to it.
So that's what you're talking about when you say evidence, right?
Yeah. Evidence for what happens when you listen, right? So the greatest story of evidence I have to this day, even when I get afraid of what I'm trying to build, is, hey, remember when you believed in this vision that people needed to tap into their intuition and you could leave this job and go teach them how to do that instead of, remember when you did that? And then out of nowhere, a client just showed up. I mean, truly out of nowhere. I got called in to do a workshop. They were like, this is great. Would you work with us? Do we have to work with your company? Just like that. That's how they asked. And I thought, oh no, I have an LLC. I have a website. Like, look at the things I did to take a step towards this container where this thing showed up. But I think when you are not able to perceive it because you're in fear, then you don't know what to do with the opportunity. Does that make sense? So you have to take little steps from that intuitive place and then watch for evidence. That way your brain can, create that pathway that says, oh, we did this courageous thing. We listened to this really calm voice. Look at this thing that came up. This is real. This isn't imaginary. And that's how you do it. It's these baby steps. But doubt doesn't go away. Imposter syndrome does not die. It is something that you're constantly tangoing with as you're choosing yourself over and over again.
Well, and what you're talking about in many ways is manifestation, right? It's not this magical exterior experience where things just appear. It's both and. It's an interior, it's an internal process that allows for you to see when the external appears and be ready to take that next step into it.
Well, and I love that you just described it that way, because I think manifestation these days is seen as such a quick magic trick kind of thing. And, what I really want more than anything is for people to understand your entire life has been a process of manifestation. It's not that you right now, because you're conscious of it, can now really dream of the $1 million and it shows up tomorrow. And if it doesn't, manifestation is BS. I think we need quick fixes. Manifestation is this constant process of what you perceive becomes your reality. And that's why I say it's a dance, because when you are in the perception of fear, when you're seeing life through the lens of limited self, there are limited options. When you begin to decide to see life through this lens of this expanded self who has faith in self, then the options and the opportunities expand too. And that is manifestation. What you perceive becomes your reality. And that takes time.
Yeah, I love that when you perceive, or when you're in fear and you only are perceiving what is limiting you, that's sort of what plays out, is all the things that limit you versus the things that don't.
Exactly. So it's this constant act of self-trust. And that, by the way, is really hard in our current time, in our society, as females, as a woman of color. There's so many reasons why we shouldn't trust ourselves, because we're conditioned not to do so. We are conditioned to believe that wisdom is external. That is why we seek gurus and guides and advice columns and now Instagram influencers who have all the answers, because we believe that kind of wisdom exists outside of us. So to believe that the wisdom is here and that you're going to listen to what's internal, that is a radical act that feels insane. It feels like you are delusional a lot, but we have to remember that's just because of our conditioning. That's not the reality.
And that's how, there's like 12 directions I want to go right now. That's how ancestors worked, right? Like a lot of these indigenous practices were turning inward to get that inner wisdom. Before I go there, and I want to talk about the self-trust thing as well, how do you specifically define intuition?
Intuition is a present knowing in the moment that is guidance unattached to any tangible place. So it is a knowing that appears seemingly out of nowhere, that is a nudge in a direction, that is not attached to a tangible source.
When you say attached to a tangible source, what do you mean by that?
Instinct, for example, I'll use as a comparison. Instinct is a biological reaction to us as a species having faced certain things that we had to survive, right? So you look at red berry, we just know instinctively red berry danger, because our ancestors had to trial and error and learn that, and that genetic information was passed down to us. And so that is an instinct that is tied to something tangible that occurred in the past and tied to tangible genetics that are giving us this fight or flight response. Intuition is not tied to anything in our known world right now. It is tied to an unseen consciousness. It is tied to something that we don't necessarily have one-to-one tangible evidence for, which is why it's harder to believe.
So when you tap into your own intuition, what do you think you are tapping into?
That is such a great and layered question. We are all attached to a larger consciousness. You might have heard the term collective consciousness. There is a web of information that is available to us, that is informed by many, 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 many things. And that those things, depending on your spiritual background, can shift and change. But what I believe your intuition is this aspect of you, which I call your higher self, that exists at a frequency that is fully tapped into that web, that cloud of knowing, that information that exists on a consciousness level beyond our individual experience. And so our higher self, choosing to stay in that place while part of us comes down here and takes on the human experience of tangible experience, which with it comes trauma, then comes pain, then comes fear and limitation. Our higher self's not existing on that plane of human experience. And so because it's tapped into this knowing consciousness, it is sending us guidance and information that is unencumbered by fear and does not have the human limitation attached to it. So to me, my intuition is coming from my higher self, which is an aspect of my own spirit that is connected to something greater that we are all connected to.
It's been a while since I've talked to you about what I'm up to. I want to first start by thanking so many of my supporters who have supported me on Patreon and in my Circle community. What's so exciting now is we have my new Circle community up and running, where if you want to contribute to supporting the podcast, you can do so at different levels for different values. So head on over to my Circle group. You can actually find the link in the show notes below. And there's opportunities to continue to support the podcast. And I have to say, your support of the podcast is frankly what has kept this podcast going over time. I have been funding the podcast solely by myself. I get a little bit of money in advertising dollars, but not a lot. So anything that you can give, if you have found value in this podcast, and it's not just giving without anything back, I will give back to you. You will be a part of this community with opportunities for discounts and conversations and ask Amy anythings. But it's a great opportunity for you to support what hopefully has helped you over the many, many years. Also, there's so many other ways now that you can work with me. I am offering a group course called Live Your Life Backwards, which is finishing its first cohort this winter and has been absolutely incredible. There's retreats coming up. There's workshops. There's one-on-one sessions with me. So many options that we can work together. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to my podcast, and make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter, where you will get a free soul wisdom workbook to help you dig deeper into the virtues that you want to be living in this lifetime. We all need so much more spirituality now. We are in a spiritual crisis, and I am giving you so many tools to tap into your own spirituality. So check out, and don't forget to subscribe to Life, Death, and the Space Between so you never miss an episode. As you're talking, I'm thinking about AI right now, and how, people, right, they can come at AI from two perspectives, very afraid or very curious and open.
Yeah.
And that there is sort of, I've always said, like, to me, AI is just the collective. It's the collective consciousness that is all that we for millennial have been putting out there.
Yeah.
And it's evolved over time as to how it shows up, right? Like it was originally in the form of like paintings on cave walls, and it's just progressed from that. And now it's in the form of information that can all be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a conglomerate of information. And now we have the ability to access that in a very practical way, but we also have that ability to access that intuitively without going through a computer and asking it the questions that we want to ask.
Right.
And so that's that.
Yeah, that's why I said like the cloud, because I think there's so many analogies, or Wi-Fi. Think about us just being connected to each other through this system of internet. Think about collective consciousness like that. It's information that's traveling at an energetic level. We don't have the consciousness yet to fully be able to articulate what it is, because we're such tangible beings. We need to see it to believe it.
Right. And that example is so on point, because yesterday, I think I just posted something on Instagram about like, we don't question Wi-Fi. But yet we are constantly questioning energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yes.
Why? Because I have no clue. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that could tell me how Wi-Fi works, in the same way that there are people who, me being one of them, understand how energy and frequency and vibration works. Maybe not from a quantum physics perspective per se, but there are people who can do that. And yet one, we say, absolutely, I'm on board. That makes sense. And the other one, I just threw my pen. Got so excited there. The other one, we say like, no way, impossible, woo, and I don't buy it.
Because Wi-Fi can produce tangible evidence. And by the way, so can energy.
Right.
But we have been trained that that kind of evidence is woo-woo, and that you're insane to believe in it. And I believe that that is because if we truly understand that the answers are within, that we can connect to some source of knowing, that we don't need to idolize, to hand our power away, to look to others for the answers, so many systems of control fall apart. So Wi-Fi gives us the tangible evidence, and we are then taught to believe that tangible evidence. The world of energy and consciousness also gives us tangible evidence, but there has been a long-standing, centuries-long campaign to vilify that form of evidence as insanity.
And so you make this shift. So you have this one client who shows up for you, and you make a shift from dealing in this crisis intense world to what? What does this look like? And how are people around you responding to it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I also think that part of the danger of hearing people in the self-help space talk about the paradigm they created and how it changed their life is that they make it sound like it was overnight. And I'm here to say that's not true.
This
Don't believe
has been
it.
my theme. Like I was telling my last guest, like it's always so fascinating to me. And this happens with my clients as well, like how themes show up consecutively within like some days, like everyone will be talking about the same thing. This has been my last like 4 guests have all talked about this same notion of sort of this spiritual awakening that happens over time. And I think collectively that's what's happening as well. Is like there's an awakening that's happening over time. So go ahead and share.
There's your tangible evidence. By the way, great example. When you get 3 or 4 things in the same day, same week, all of it, that is energy trying to say, there's some tangible evidence that, this matters. But again, we don't see that as tangible.
And we call that, I would call that a synchronicity, right?
It's a synchronicity. Exactly.
And that, I mean, how you think and how I think are very similar. Like that's the evidence I look for. And also that's how I know what I call them the lily pads. That's how I know what lily pad to next step on. It's like, okay, I don't need to know. I always say, and this is what I talk about in one of my classes that I teach. I don't need to know how to get to the other side of the pond. I just need to trust that I'm going to get there. And what pops up for me is going to be the next right step to take to get there.
Oh, beautiful. And because you believe that, that's how life shows up for you.
Right. And that's manifesting.
Right
there.
Exactly.
Boiled down.
Exactly.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember what I was answering though. Now I'm on the lily pad and I love it.
Oh my God. What was
you were asking, how did I get there? How did I get from leaving to what I do now? And what is what I do now? And that's why I just want to flag, I'm not going to tell you some story of enlightenment where 2 weeks later I was a published author.
Right. That's what we were talking about, is that this is a process, not just like a.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened was I started to take on clients then that were sort of like what I used to do at my agency, because that is how I knew how to make money. And what I decided was I'm going to do this at a higher frequency. I'm going to, for example, say that part of working with me, if you want me to come fix something for your company, is I'm coaching you. And then, well, if you're coming to me with a crisis, Mr. or Mrs. Founder, we're coaching to figure out how you got yourself in that situation. And that was the bridge I created. Is like, here's the thing I know how to make money off of, but here's the purpose I want to have. And through that work, I started to build a method that started to feel very foolproof, because I was watching people transform in front of me, or they were telling me, or their head of HR would call and say, I don't know what you did, but this is a whole different leader all of a sudden. And that's how I started to build the method of intuitive leadership and intuitive life coaching, is really through coaching people and accepting my own intuition and accepting that I am a channel for this information and that is enough. I don't need to go run out and get a certification. Not that I'm saying that is bad. For me, the validation came from build the method slowly, try it and see how it's working, and continue to believe in yourself. And that method then sort of started just through word of mouth to spread until I found myself in front of people on Zoom, that I'd watched growing up on TV, coaching them, because once it works for someone and then it, they let people know. So then the coaching business really grew from there. And from there, the book deal came, and it was, can you write this method down? And I did, and I did it in this form of half memoir, half method, and some case studies, because I wanted people to understand I am not a guru sitting on some high mountain telling you what to do. I am right here next to you. And here's my life. And here are all the ways that I also didn't have faith and had to learn how to, and was scared and did it anyway. And so that is where all of this has now come from, is just continuing to listen and build out my practice little by little. Now I am so fortunate I'm in a place where I get to truly say yes or no from a place of checking in with myself and asking, is this in line with your integrity? Does this really match your purpose? Is it going to create the impact you want? But that didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of yeses I had to say to get me to this place.
Do you ever feel like when you ask those questions and the answer is no, you still do it anyway?
I don't do it anyway now. I can tell you that that is true. But that is recent. I will say that is maybe in the last year. Again, because I do crisis management, I will get, hey, can you work on this? Can you help with that? And over the last year, I've noticed I will check in and be like, I don't really believe that person, or I don't think that they mean well. I think they just want me to write a bunch of things for them to say that they don't mean. And so I'm able to say no, because what I'm finding is genuinely the cost is greater than the opportunity. That I am such a manifester, and so are all of us, that if we don't actually believe in what we're doing, and for me, if I don't love it and I don't believe in it, it doesn't end well for me. It doesn't resource me. I don't know that it probably
does for anybody, but they're just unwilling to listen to that.
Right. So I have a new calculation, a new cost benefit analysis to my yeses and nos. And so I think that's why my no is easier, because I fully understand the cost of saying yes when I don't mean it.
And when you're doing that cost benefit analysis, are you just tuning in and asking those questions that you just outlined?
Absolutely. But also, we, like, our body and our psyche, our emotions, our energy are this really interesting unit that very organically work well together. So for example, I could ask you a question right now and you'll get a little contraction in your heart. That's right there. Your body's telling you within seconds, that doesn't feel good. I don't like the way that what she asked me felt. So I think that the more you train yourself to listen to your body, first and foremost, your energy. Ooh, does this feel draining to me? Well, there goes my life force. Your emotions. The more that system starts to click into place and work well together, and then it truly becomes very intuitive. It doesn't often take me a lot of stopping to check. Now, I can tell you when I have to stop to check is when my fear of scarcity jumps in. That's my loudest fear voice. There's not going to be enough money, because I grew up with a single mom who really struggled. She got us there, but man, did she stress out. And I watched it. So I have that fear from that experience that says you're not going to be able to keep providing for your kids. And so when that voice is loud, I do have to pause and just do this. Wait a minute. That thought feels like a contraction. Okay, deep breath. What is the opposite of that thought? What does that one feel like? And again, which self am I going to choose? I'm accountable to that choice. I could choose the fear self, but I know from the calculation that this is going to be the cost.
What you're talking about in so many ways is it's so psychological, right? And
Deeply.
You're also talking about when people talk from like a transgenerational trauma perspective.
Yeah.
And, this scarcity mindset, like you could have very easily relived that. And you, as I see it from like a spiritual perspective, is you sort of broke a karmic contract in many ways, right?
Yeah.
You cleared that karma out for next generations who might come, and because you found yourself in, it sounds like, a very similar place, which was,
right.
You were a single mom, you had money coming in, and if you pivoted, there was a chance that you could probably end up more like your mom than you did. And so you had, and this is, I think, what's great about your story is it really illuminates where the psychological and spiritual kind of come together.
Absolutely.
Is that there is this these aren't concepts that we have to think of as like, oh, I have to do all this cord cutting and like, I mean, that could be part of it. But in many ways, what is spiritual is psychological. And it's that you recognize that this was something carried down. You had an opportunity to do something different. Intuitively, your soul knew that was maybe, we could look at it from a soul contract perspective, that was a lesson you needed to learn, to work through, to clear out, and you did it. And so now that's like cleared for generations to come.
Yeah. And the empowering feeling that came with knowing I was healing my lineage backwards and forward, I felt so empowered by that knowing that was also really addictive. That feeling of, oh, wow, look at the power I have to break this cycle. Why wouldn't I do it? Even when I'm afraid, what a massive responsibility I now have on my shoulders that I take really seriously. So I do think that is why spirituality can be so empowering to people. That's why this concept of faith has buoyed so many. And I think that when some of us, I'm not religious, and religion is one of those systems that I believe puts us in limited boxes for the most part. But I do think that the reason religion is such a sustaining force is because of that faith element. That's really the part that gets you through the hard times, is believing in something greater than yourself. All I'm saying is the thing you're believing in that's greater than yourself is this part of yourself. Right. It is your higher self. It's not some external force. It's you. You're the thing that is empowered to do it.
And that is, as you talked about earlier, plugged into perhaps something greater than, or collect, maybe not greater than, but connected to.
Exactly. There is much more than our consciousness can perceive or understand about source energy. Whatever you want to call that, God, universe, there is a source from which we come, and our higher self is plugged into that, and we are an aspect of that. We are one prism of light in that larger being.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk, I want to get back to what you mentioned earlier, which was self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a world where we have access to everything now, and we have access to lots of people telling us that there are certain ways to do things, and that way is the only way, where does self-trust come in, and how can we begin to really cultivate that within ourselves?
I am on this mission right now. I'm calling it the self-trust revolution, because what I have come to realize through my research is that the wellness industry right now is a $5.6 trillion industry. A large percentage of that is the self-help industry. And yet, when studies are done, BetterUp did a study a couple of years ago, 85% of people are saying, I've tried all the self-help stuff, I don't feel any better. 72% of people are saying, there's so much advice out there, I don't know who to listen to anymore. Well, for me, that lights up a part of me that goes, I want you to listen to you. I don't want you to feel that you are lost in this sea of advice because you've been taught that the answer is out there. So the self-trust revolution for me means we are going to reject the idea that someone else's paradigm is the perfect fit for our life. Instead, we're going to understand that we need to build the paradigm from inside. It's like, think about our ancestors and the materials they used to build their homes. They used what was organic to that landscape. So you saw mud huts in some places, and you saw homes built of ice in other places, because that's what the environment allowed. That was organic. So when you think about building a paradigm for your life, that means you're working with the internal wisdom. You're working with your own values. You're working with your own desires, and you're designing a paradigm, a system by which you are going to live your life and make decisions. If you pull someone else's paradigm in and attempt to live your life by it, it's like bringing that ice hut over into the tropics and trying to live in it. It falls apart because it's not organic to you.
That's a great metaphor. That's a great metaphor.
I think the trouble with that is when it doesn't work, we think we're the failure. That's why I'm so passionate about this mission, is that when you buy the self-help book, which, by the way, I know that my book sits in that category too, because we don't have a self-trust category yet. So fully noted. But
I'll
when you
join you in the self-trust category.
Good. Okay, let's do it. I love it. But when you do that and you try it, maybe you see some benefit, right? Because there are parts of the paradigm that do work for your system. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. There are slight changes that you can make because they fit you. But if all of it doesn't work, or you don't achieve the overnight success that the author wrote about in the prologue, which I just want to scream every time I read those, you feel like you have failed. And I am here to say, no, you didn't fail. The paradigm is not the right fit for you. Let's start in here. Let's build a system in here where you can always go back to seek any answer you're ever looking for inside. Because think about how empowering that is. Then all of a sudden, you don't need me. You don't need Dr. Amy. You don't need whoever. You know that you have the answers within you. And so my job is to just turn that light bulb on and disappear. And you become self-reliant and self-empowered.
I think the hardest part in that for people is listening to what their intuition is telling them.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, it's like someone comes into my office and I'm like, I mean, I know in 30 seconds what needs to happen, right? But I can't tell them what needs to happen. I could, but it's not what I'm hired to do. I mean, my job is really, I mean, I see myself similar to you. Like my job is to help people tap into their own inner knowing. I don't call it that. But, you know, and we look at their past relationships and how those impacted their current choices that they make. But it really is about like tapping into your own inner knowing. And I know when people like eventually we'll get to that point where the person stopped listening and, or where they started or will understand why they stopped listening. And usually there's a very good reasons for this, right? We can understand why they ended up on the path they ended up on. But once you can get back to that, the hard part is then what do you do from there? Because oftentimes at that kind of pivotal point, there become sometimes really challenging decisions to make that could have serious impacts. I mean, we're talking about like you leaving a job, right? Sometimes people leaving relationships they've been in for a long time, like all of these things because they listened to the external noise about what mattered and not their internal compass.
Yes, right. And it is challenging. And I go back to the cost, you know, when you choose a life designed by someone else as being successful, I promise you feel like you're suffocating. I know if you have chosen that and you're hearing my words, this part of your body goes, yep, I can't breathe, or I feel tight, right? Your body is sick, communicating nauseous to you. Right. Exactly. And so I think it just becomes about loving yourself enough to stop choosing suffering because someone else told you that was what good looked like. Loving yourself enough to say, I know you told me this is success, but I am dying inside. And I love this life force too much to let it slip away to match your version, your definition of success.
I just had such I don't know why this came to me. I'm just going to put it all out there because I've been doing this long enough. What you said just took me back to this moment I had when I was in college and I was sort of dating this guy and I'm not going to say who it is. But I remember waking up one morning and feeling like physically nauseous at the thought of ever needing to even look at him again, let alone kiss him or anything more than that. And it's like and that to me, like as you were just describing this, came on as a light bulb for me is like, these are the moments that we don't listen to, right? Oh, maybe I had too much to drink last night. Right. Maybe that's not really what it was, but I could not even muster up the strength to see him. I can go back to that place right now, even as we're talking about it, as like what it felt like, that like pit in my stomach, that like, I never want to kiss him again. And that's exactly what you're talking about is this intuitive knowing. And yet there could have been, oh, well, he's known as this, or I'm supposed to like this type
Yeah.
of person because he represents these things or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just, we get those moments a million times in our lives.
Yeah,
And we don't
absolutely.
listen.
The fear voice is so loud. I mean, I left my marriage. Also, I write about this in the book. This higher self chimed up 2 big times in a span of 5 years. It was leave the marriage, leave the job. And it was like, oh God, you're killing me.
And
But,
you did it. And you did
and
it.
I did it. And I did it because, to your point, when the contraction would happen and I'd be like, oh God, this isn't good for me, the fear voice would say, you're going to be a single mom. You're going to raise 2 kids without their dad, like how you were raised. That's embarrassing. What a failure. How terrible. And so again, I had to learn to discern between these voices and say, ooh, is that thought in my highest good? Or is that a survival thought that is just like, hey, stay small, stay protected, versus this other thought that's like, trust me, baby girl, you're going to thrive. I want you to thrive. And again, I do think it is about loving yourself enough so that you want to thrive, not just believe, well, all I'm here to do is survive.
So how does this look in work with CEOs and leaders?
I will say that there are a lot of leaders who are leading quite intuitively. They just don't have the language for it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this is about showing them, actually, you do this. And not only should you keep doing it, you should do it when the board or the investors or the, stakeholders are screaming and knocking down your door with pitchforks. That's when you really need to lean into it. Not you stop leading in this way when the external pressure gets so loud, because that's usually when they make the mistake. So it's really showing them that. And then it's about showing them, okay, so look at how this is working in your leadership and in what you can be creative around. What would happen if you encouraged your teams to also be deeply intuitive? What would happen if you introduced this language of intuition to your culture, where it was, I'm sensing this, so we're going to go get some data to see if we're right. Or, my gut feeling says we shouldn't do this. Okay, let's have a meeting and actually talk about it, so that it's not hidden in the closet of corporate America, but it's more openly spoken about. And really showing them you're using this skill 100 times a day. Let's just put language to it and allow you to do it. A lot of the time, I still get called in when that founder or CEO is in a crisis. So, it is about unwinding that for them first, but then showing them really clearly, I've built a message so they can see it. Where was the part I stopped listening, and how did this go haywire in that moment? And once they see it, they really can't unsee it. And that's where the transformation happens, is noticing, oh, I am ignoring this part of me, which is what's causing this chaos to ensue.
So you do the same thing for businesses that I do for individuals, right?
Totally.
It's like,
yeah,
right? I always say people come for the crisis, they stay for the growth. You come in
that's right,
because there's a crisis, and usually we can trace that crisis back to some point in your life, and it could have been very early on, and there could have been trauma, and I'm obviously simplifying for the nature of this podcast, but where the wires got the wires got crossed, and you decided that you were going to, protect yourself at all costs, at the cost of yourself, maybe, rather than listening intuitively to what was best, which would be protective.
Right.
If you trusted it.
Exactly. And, I am now not afraid to say I am intuitive. And that's not something you say in corporate culture, right? Like, I didn't walk around the agency calling myself intuitive. Exactly. Right. And so because I own it, I can use it in a session now. I can say, hey, what I'm getting from your energy is this. And then I get the wide-eyed, how could you know that? And by the way, that I use as evidence for my brain to say, see, you got to keep saying it out loud. And that helps facilitate faster growth, I think, because I'm nudging them towards something that I'm sensing myself. And that's where I think, I have the freedom of not being in this frame of therapy where, a therapist, I know you have to follow certain rules and guidance. For me, it's like, I'm just going to tell you the nudge I'm getting, and you do with it what you want to do. And that has also been really helpful. Although then I go to my therapist and I process my feelings. So I really think this is two-sided coin. I think that we are so binary
binary,
right?
yeah.
That like, you're going to hear this and it's like, oh, she's saying just go to an intuitive. And I'm like, no. I am saying it's got to be all of it. We have to use all the resources available to us to be a whole person. Mm-hmm. And for far too long, we've been so Western medicine, so, one side of the brain, so linear. All I'm asking for us to do is just move to the center, not go all the way to the other side of the pendulum either.
Right. And I'm with you. And I think that there's a place, I'm finding there's way more clinicians that are speaking about it, that are using their intuition. I mean, and so much of what you do, what I do, right? You are tapping energetically into what people are feeling, experiencing.
Totally.
This knowing that kind of comes over where you just say the exact right thing. And someone's like, oh my God, how did you know that?
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, some of it is training and doing this for years, and you start to build a muscle there. But also just intuitively, if you open up to it, you can say the exact right thing that someone needs to hear because you're just being guided to do that.
And you trust the guidance. Actually, when I interview therapists, I always say, one of my questions is, how do you use your intuition in a session? And they're like, what? Or the right person will say, here's how. And then I'm like, okay, you're the person for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think more therapists are using it than they even know. They just don't know 100%. How to identify it. But yeah, absolutely. Well,
I saw a stat somewhere that said 80% of nurses say that they use intuition to help their patients.
I mean, I'm sure that they do, and doctors, because you're making these split-second decisions, and some of it has to be just like gut.
Yeah.
So, Mory, if people are interested in learning more, I cannot believe we're done. Like, that went so fast.
You knew it. You said it's going to go like that.
I know. And I just looked at the time and I was like, whoa. If people want to learn more about your work, more of what you do, tell everyone where they can find you and your book, Higher Self, Reclaiming the Power of Your Intuition. Where can they get all of this information?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You can buy Higher Self anywhere that you purchase books. You can follow me on Instagram at Mory Fontanez. I have a podcast with my best friend called Signal that you can feel free to tune into. And then you can always go to my website, moryfontanez.com.
Mory, thank you so much for your time and energy, and for certainly, again, like, interestingly, I've had a couple people recently come on and talk about spiritual leadership. And I think that that's really what you're talking about, is intuitive leading. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and for what you're doing in the world of corporate America, because it is crucial right now. I think all of us kind of lifting all of these different areas to be more conscious is I believe, what's going to shift and change the planet. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.